My name's Stephen Bartlett, and I'm happy to be here today at the Gray Street Farmers Market, talking about the origin of corn. Actually, our organization, Sustainable Agriculture of Louisville, began at a tamal festival, which connected in a very strong way with corn, a big crop of corn we had one year. And first, I'd like to just ask anyone here: do you know what corn comes from? Where is corn from? Anybody know where corn is from?
Andrea, where's corn from? Glenn?
Are we talking like...
What's the origin of corn?
Like where in the world?
Country-wise?
Yeah, where in the world does corn come from?
I would think Africa.
Mexico.
Africa? Mexico.
Mexico.
Mexico and the part of what we call Mesoamerica. And actually the ancestor of corn is called teosinte. And it's a grass. Corn is a grass. And teosinte is a grass with a little head of grain about so big, tiny. And something about 10,000 years ago, native Mesoamericans, probably Mayans or Aztecs or Toltecs, they took the grains, they began selecting teosinte grains and selecting bigger and bigger, the biggest ones they could find. And within a short time, relatively short time, you have the modern day corn, which all corn in the world today is a descendant of that original corn that was selected by ancient Mesoamericans during the Neolithic time. Today we have today we are the beneficiaries of that tradition. Here we have some native corn from the Ohio Valley. One's called Hickory King, the white one, and one is called Bloody Butcher, but we're trying to find another name for that. It's, I guess, the red color. Our organization, which is basically a group of volunteers, we've been growing this corn for the past 10 years and selecting the seeds, and we consider ourselves the guardians of these varieties of corn seed. Because as you may have heard, many species are under threat because of genetic modification and the cross-pollination that happens in the fields that contaminate native organic corns by corns that have been genetically modified in laboratory, crossing species lines. So we are very happy every year to be growing this corn, and we grind it. And I'm going to ask a volunteer, I don't know if Mary or Mara would like to start grinding. As I tell the story, we can have some corn
I'll let
grinding.
you grind and I'll take pictures.
So I was at a great big meeting of farmers down in Brazil, and a great literary figure, Eduardo Galeano, gave us the story, the Mayan story of creation. And as it happens, you may have heard that corn is considered sacred, to be a sacred plant throughout indigenous America, Mesoamerica, and throughout the Americas. And the fact is that the creation stories of the Mayans, it goes like this. First, God was lonely and God wanted to have company, so God created humans out of clay and created very beautiful humans. But the problem with the clay humans was that when the sun came out, they got very dry and brittle and they broke off into pieces. So God said, well, we've got to try something else. So then they said, let's make them out of wood. So God made beautiful wooden human beings, and they were very elegant, very shiny skinned, beautiful humans, very strong, they could live a long time. But the problem with the wooden humans was that when they spoke, it didn't make any sense. They couldn't make sense when they spoke. So God, very disappointed because they were very beautiful, God said, well, we've got to do away with them. So they burned all the wooden humans. Says, what shall we make humans out of? Finally God said, let's make humans out of corn. Because corn is the right consistency. It's a living thing that can reproduce itself. And it's all the colors. It's a very diverse crop. All the colors of the rainbow are in corn. And so God made people out of corn. And for that reason, all humans are considered the children of corn. And what Eduardo Galeano adds to the story is that somewhere around the earth there are still some wooden humans. The humans who were the original mold made from wood, who are out there, and they look just like people born of corn. But the problem is when they speak, it's just not nonsense. And those are the people who are causing all the problems today. Yeah, that's the story of the Mayan story of corn. So the CEO of Monsanto, who knows, might be a wooden human being. That's kind of the story.
Nicest thing someone said.
So yeah, our organization, we had a very interesting convergence of events that took place. And it's all about corn. I was desperate to grow corn after coming back to the United States, coming back to Louisville from farming in the Dominican Republic. And I didn't have any place to grow it, so I was borrowing people's plots and things. And there was a friend whose husband had just died, a widow, and he was a great proponent for justice in Central America and Latin America. And he was involved in the movement against the School of the Americas, which were training people to kill, democratic movements in the Americas. And he had died, so I asked his widow if I could, because he grew a big crop of corn every year. So we grew, I went out and planted the Hickory King. These were the first crops that we grew. I got it at Bunton's seed store, the seed. You can't find it every year now from Bunton's. Actually, Bunton's is now out of business. So these corns, we are now the guardians of these corn. I grew about, and it was a great crop, and he had fertilized the ground over years, and we had 500 pounds of corn. We said, what are we going to do with all this corn? So we got all my friends from Kitlac to come out, and we shelled all the corn, and we transported it, and then we said, we're going to have a tamal festival, and we're going to invite people to come and help cook, and we're going to invite everybody to come and eat tamales. We're just going to do it because we have this surplus. We're going to give it away. And but the problem was we didn't know how to make the tamales from corn, because this takes a very special process that was invented by Mesoamericans thousands of years ago, and that's called making nixtamal. Nixtamal is the corn processed by soaking it in an alkaline solution, which is usually cal, or limestone. Or you could add a lot of ash, wood ash, to a pot of water in the corn and let it sit and soak, heat it up, and then eventually the corn loses its skin. It goes through a chemical reaction. The niacin, the protein in the corn, becomes available to the human body. The calcium increases by 800%. So when you make nixtamal, make it into tortillas, it's like a superfood. It's a super bread. And when you eat that together with beans, you have a fully nutritious protein source. And so we didn't know how to do that. So I eventually found a tortilla factory, a tortilleria in Lexington. And I carried 125 pounds of drying corn in my car to Lexington. I delivered it to them. They were willing to do this for free.
Wow.
Because we were going to give away all these tamales. They soaked it overnight in cal, or limestone, and then they ground it with their stone grinders. And I went to pick it up with a lot of buckets with 200 pounds of nixtamal, or masa in Spanish. We then gathered about 20 cooks, half of them being Guatemalans and Mexicans, and some native-born, mostly white folks. And we got together at our church kitchen, and we began 20 hours of cooking. We produced 800 tamales. We had giant tamaleros to steam them. You could fit about 100 tamales at a time in them to cook them. And it took 20 hours, and we cooked 800 tamales, and then we went out. Unfortunately, during the time when we were preparing this event, the attacks of 9/11 took place. And we were planning to have this on September 22nd, just 11 days after 9/11. We had a big debate. Should we do it? Should we not do it? We decided, well, we have to do it because this is what we should be doing to promote, democracy and secure communities. We need our own sources of good food, et cetera, et cetera. So we did it. We had native Guatemalans who live in Louisville, or native Quiche people, talk about the importance of corn. And the tamales were incredible because they were from fresh corn. You cannot get such tamales anywhere unless you make them from fresh corn. Because most Latin Americans or Mesoamericans, when they prepare tamales now in the United States, they buy a prepared food called maseca. And maseca will use any old corn. They'll use genetically modified corn, they'll use corn that's sprayed with chemicals, and corn that's been sitting around a long time, etc. And it's done in an industrial process that's not as good as making it from fresh. So when you have freshly made tamales, it's like nothing you can. And then of course we roast the tomatillos, take the skins off. It's very labor intensive, and it's incredible, incredible food. So someone said during the middle of this, while people were eating, they said, you can't just give all of it. At least put your hat out. So I took my hat and I put it on the table by the tamales. And by the end of the Tamal Festival, when we were listening to music from the choir from Shelbyville, from the Catholic Church there in Spanish, and we were dancing, we looked in the hat, and there were more than $1,000 in the hat. And so we said, what will we do with this money? Let's create an organization called Sustainable Agriculture of Louisville, which in Spanish means sal, salt, or fertilizer, or fermentation, etc. So that's how our organization began, and we teach children, and corn grinding is one of the things the children do in our gardening day camps every single day, and we make cornbread together as part of our camp over in Crescent Hill at our community garden. That's the story of the origin of the Sustainable Agriculture of Louisville. But corn is under threat today. You know, as I mentioned, not only are we having contamination by industrial genetically modified corn, but we're also losing a lot of varieties of corn. In Mexico, a lot of the corn has during the free trade area of America since 1994, corn has been exported massively to Mexico. And a lot of that corn, unfortunately, has been planted, and it's genetically modified and has crossed with the native varieties. The communities that are most remote and that have refused to have, let's say, sell their corn for export, who have refused to receive government help, such as the Zapatista movement in Chiapas, they have the native corns that are completely pure still. They've been tested, and they have hundreds of varieties of corn that are still pure. This year, we have a crop of three sisters. Who knows what the three sisters are in a crop?
Oh, I've heard it.
One of the sisters is corn.
It's corn, beans, and I'm trying to remember what the third one is.
Corn, beans, and what covers the ground of the corn and beans? The
Squash.
squash.
Yeah, squash.
Squash. And we usually grow squash that vines out a lot. Not like summer squash, which only is a small plant, but winter squashes, which vine out and cover the whole ground. There's a symbiotic relationship. These three sisters look out for each other. So the corn looks out for the beans, because the beans climb the corn stalks. Today we have corn that's 12 foot high, and the pole beans have climbed all the way to the top of the corn.
That's awesome.
And below, we have the squash. And the squash looks out for the corn, because the squash has little hairs on the leaves that certain pests of corn do not like. And they cannot walk through the squash patch to get to the corn. So the squash is protecting the corn. And the beans are fixing nitrogen, which helps keep the soil fertile and helps the corn grow. So there's a symbiotic relationship between the three. In addition, the squash covers all the ground. And we have squash now. Within 6 weeks, it was this high, and now it's completely covered the whole field. There's no weeds can survive. It shades the ground completely. And so with the three sisters, you can get three crops from the same plot. They help each other, and you get a very high. This year, I think we're going to have a most amazing harvest. We have 1/3 of an acre. This old hickory corn, Hickory King, is 12 foot tall. It's going to produce 1 or 2 ears per. And they're planted in groups of 2 or 3 corn stalks in each spot. And each of them has a pole bean loaded with beans. And the squashes are going to be by the tons. All the crops are going to be by the tons. Okay? So we're going to have a lot of distributing to do. But we have a lot of volunteers who help plant and weed, and so we're going to distribute that food. We're also going to have parties where we grind the corn and share 10-pound, 5-pound bags of cornmeal for us to enjoy the bounty of this very fertile land here in Kentucky. This beautiful alluvial plain that we have, very fertile land, good conditions most years. Last year, This corn, you remember last year we had, I don't know how many days over 100 degrees, and we had 2 months over 90 degrees. We had a drought, 8 or 9 weeks. Despite all that, we got 250 pounds of corn. And the neighbors who had whole fields covered, this is out in Meade County, they lost virtually all of their corn. But these native varieties are very hardy. They have deep tap roots. They are tall, but they also have deep roots, and they survive very well. So this corn, I've taken it to meetings, international meetings, where we've exchanged seeds, and this corn has gone, this Hickory King from Ohio Valley has gone all over Africa, all over South America, Central America. And the bean we plant, one of the beans, is a climbing bean. It's a Paraguay cowpea that I traded for. I traded some Hickory King corn in Paraguay for these beans. And these beans came up, I planted them on Friday. On a Monday they were up with 2 leaves, and they were tracking the sun, just like a sunflower. And they keep flowering, they're incredibly vigorous, and they don't suffer from any of the bean diseases that are common here. Mexican bean beetle, etc. Can't touch them. We've had them in fields where all the other beans were wiped out by Mexican bean beetle with the refugee farmers on the south side of Louisville, but our beans were untouched, and so they've become very popular among the refugees as well. That's the fun of being guardians of seeds and knowing that seeds are the natural gifts of the earth to all of humanity. They should never be owned, and they should always be shared. So that's the story of corn here in the Ohio Valley, all the way back to Mesoamerica. We say thank you to all the farmers who selected and cared for this fantastic resource for all these thousands of years.
Thank you. If anybody wants to get involved, on your website or your blog?
Yeah, I mean, you can contact me. My name is Stephen Bartlett. If you speak Spanish, you can call me Esteban. My phone number is 502-896-9171. And my email is sbartlett, S-B-A-R-T-L-E-T-T, at ag-missions.org. Our organization, if you get on our mailing list, our email list, you'll be notified about garden parties where we work together in the garden. We share the harvest together. We're having one this Friday, for example. Later, we're going to be doing sweet potato harvesting party out in Meade County, and in October we'll be harvesting this year's Three Sisters crop, which will be a big event. And it's I don't know, we may have to bring trucks to carry all the produce that we're going to have at that time. So this is all by hand work. You know, we use hand tools, machetes, and hoes. It's a lot of fun. Anyone can do it. And we grind the corn. We are thinking about getting an electric corn grinder, just because we may have more corn that we can grind by hand this year. So,
what a great problem.
Yeah. So thank you very much. And food sovereignty is the name of the game. We have to protect and develop our own food systems, and that's what we're about. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I'm curious. So what about